Alright guys, how's it going? This is my full review of the Razer Blade 17 early 22 model. I have in my possession two of the 30 Ti models, one with the 4K display and one with the QHD display. The 4K display has 144 hertz. The QHD has 244 hertz. And I'll be getting into all of those. But first, let's just talk about the build and the design. So, it's an old design. Razer has kept this design for the past several years. I believe in 2017 is when they redesigned the Blade. And in 2018 they introduced the 17-inch for the first time. And while it could look dated if you've been following along with Razer for the past several years, but honestly, the competition still hasn't caught up in terms of the build and design. This is still the sleekest looking laptop out there, and especially in terms of the build quality, but just the way that the angles are and the way the CNC milled aluminum kind of cuts out is made from one single block, so you feel the premium. So if I'm comparing it to some of the competition out there, the ROG S17 does feel premium, and it's also a full metal design as well, and you'll see that on the website. However, when you're holding it in your hand, you can feel that there's different types of metal throughout the chassis. So, for example, the lid would be a thick, high-quality aluminum, similar to what the entire Razer is made out of. But around the keyboard deck, it'll feel a bit different, and at the bottom, it'll feel more like a magnesium alloy, which it's a bit of a stark difference. If I'm comparing it to the GE76, I think that's really solid build quality too. The aluminum they use also feels high quality, but the bottom panel, the bottom of the laptop is made out of plastic, which I know I'm talking about Razer, but I do prefer to have that plastic at the bottom, because this Razer on the load gets too hot. You can't play on your lap if you're editing on your lap, or if you're running any type of CPU intense program on your lap. You will feel it, and it will get uncomfortably hot. So I don't want to knock the GE76 or for any laptop design that chooses to use some type of material that would not hold in a lot of that heat that's trying to escape. So, but yeah, no, I do think the build quality is still the best out of the competition, out of everything that I've tried. It's close. It's really close to something like the Dell XPS 17 or to the MacBook Pro. And it's probably the only gaming laptop that could compete in that front when it comes to build quality. And so next I want to talk about the speakers. They are the loudest, and at high volumes they don't distort. And I think one way they're able to get away with that is the bass isn't as deep as what the ROG line of laptops are able to accomplish. And if you do have a ROG laptop and you're considering the Razer, thinking about jumping ships, I think your first impression would be that these don't sound as good. It doesn't have that bass. It doesn't have that dynamic nature of the sound of like an ROG laptop, well, or just about any gaming laptop, to be honest. But once you start gaming, and once you start listening to music, and your ears kind of adjust to the lack of bass that you're probably accustomed to, you will notice a more detailed sound. And especially when it comes to games, to music, to movies. There's 8 speakers on the 17-inch, and they're positioned and angled in certain ways to bounce off of the screen and kind of give you a surround sound effect. I know the S17 does that really well, and the Zephyrus Duo does that really well. Every other gaming laptop, in terms of speakers, to be honest, is just average. None of them could touch something like the non-gaming line, like the XPS or the MacBook, which I'm gonna try to stop comparing this laptop to that. But I mean, it does well in gaming, but it also gets into that territory. So this is a multi-purpose laptop. But so coming back to the speakers, I will say this. When I was playing a competitive shooter, I think it was either Overwatch or Halo Infinite, and I even noticed this when I was playing Doom Eternal as well too. The way that THX tuned these speakers, all eight of them, I'm able to get really good positioning. There was someone behind me and a little bit to the left, and I was able to hear their footsteps and turn my mouse quickly and be able to take aim at them and be able to focus my crosshair on them. And I didn't realize it right away, but when I thought about it, I was like, wow, I'm using speakers and I'm able to get really good precision accuracy from these speakers. And it doesn't, so that I think that's really helpful for gaming. And it doesn't fill a room the way a lot of other laptops do, but I think they're tuned specifically for you if you're sitting right in front of the laptop. And I think you do get a good experience. I'm not gonna. I did. I tried recording several of the different laptops I had, but none of them come through in the microphone and in the quality. So what sounds better to my ears sounds worse on camera, and vice versa. So I don't think that's a good representation of what to expect. I think the best I can do is try to explain it the best I can, and I hope I did that. So but no, I think the speakers are good. They're incredibly loud, and you get really good positioning. I think next year, if they can work on getting a bit more bass, then I would be happy. But not don't add bass just for adding its sake. Detailed bass. There's a big difference. Next, thermals. So good, really, really good. This year they've added more ventilation ports at the bottom of the laptop, and the fans are a little bit better, and that gives them the ability to get the TGP up to 165 watts with dynamic boost. And I'm happy to say, in a lot of games, in GPU intense games, it's hitting it's hitting close to the 165 watts. I know I'm not in the performance section yet, but I think it's important to highlight that despite that it's pushing 45 watts almost consistently on the CPU when it needs to, along with up to 165 watts on the GPU, 82 degrees max on the GPU, and I'm in South Florida, and it's starting to get a bit warm here. So depending on where you are, that could be better. The CPU, however, in most real tasks, it'll get to like 95, which is scary, but it's not in throttle territory. The only time, and again, I'm going to get into performance, but it's kind of important for me to talk about this. So with both of these laptops, both the 4K and the QHD, when I was running Time Spy, the moment it went to the CPU section, immediately it throttled. It went straight up to 100 and stayed there. So on the CPU side, my scores were like 9,000, 10,000, or 11,000, which for 12th gen, that's just way too low. So what I ended up doing was literally just lifting it up. I ran the score again, and I literally just lifted it up like this, and ran just the CPU section alone, and I got between 12,000 and 13,000, which is what I was expecting. So again, I'll get into more of the details of the performance between these two when I get into the performance section. But I think talking about thermals kind of makes me have to talk about some of the scores I've been seeing. So if you're going to be running high CPU intensive tasks, I would definitely recommend getting a laptop stand or finding some way to prop it up, just so you could maximize the performance that this machine is capable of. So maybe next year, Razer, if they can just give us some thicker feet at the bottom or some taller feet to help with airflow, or yeah, we'll see what happens next year. But I mean, it's only been an issue in benchmarks, or if I'm running something intense like so. Yeah, I think that'll do it for thermals. I think the RGB on the only RGB is on the keyboard. It's not like like the Scar series or the Legion series, or a lot of other gaming laptops where there's RGB all over the place. The only RGB is on the back lid, which is which only illuminates as green. There's no way to change that, and the keyboard. And the keyboard lighting is great. It's probably one of the most elegant looking RGB, and it's very customizable in the Synapse software. One thing I will point out that no other gaming laptop considers is the minimum brightness. The minimum brightness is really important if you're using this laptop in pitch darkness. In every other gaming laptop, and I'm talking the Legion, well, not the G76, well, that's a different issue. The G76 it never got bright enough, the RGB at least. The the S17, the Legion, the Scar series, their minimum brightness is still incredibly bright, so it's hard to wind down at night, or it's hard to focus on the content that you're looking at when the RGB is kind of staring you right in the face. So it forces me to have to turn it off completely, which sucks because now I can't see what I'm typing. So I think that's something that every manufacturer needs to start considering going forward is the minimum brightness of the keyboard. But that's enough of RGB. All right, so now this is probably one of the main reasons why you're coming to specifically this video, because I'm actually able to get eyes on time with both the 4K model and the QHD model. And now I'm going to start talking about the displays. So right off the bat, we're getting about 400 to 450 nits of brightness on the 4K panel, and around 300 to 315, that's 315 nits on the QHD panel. So right away, that could be a deal breaker for some of you. But the contrast and the color volume on both of these displays are so good that you'll be okay if you're only using the QHD. So I mean, it really comes down to what your preference is. So if you're playing esports, or you just care about higher frames, then obviously the QHD panel is the one for you. The only thing you'll have to do is forego some brightness, and it's a noticeable amount. There are times when I wish that this model was brighter. Never this. I think 450 nits is more than adequate. I mean, I could always ask for 500 nits, but I think 400 and whatever this is, whether it's between 400 or 450, I've never like really found myself asking for more, unless maybe if I try to use this laptop out in the direct sunlight, and you don't want to do that. It's not a good experience. So I think that's kind of what it comes down to. It's hard to, I mean, it's easy for me to choose to choose what I would prefer. I would prefer the 4K 144 hertz panel. I do notice that I noticed the extra sharpness in games. I was playing Red Dead Redemption on the 4K panel, and then I was going back and forth between the QHD panel, and I did notice individual blades of grass and leaves and like the detail on Arthur Morgan's hat more on the 4K panel. It was noticeable, and it did create a better experience. And the higher brightness output created something a bit more immersive, especially when as the day night cycles, switching to daytime, or if when I'm playing Dying Light and you're in a dark cave and you go outside, typically games kind of overexposes, and you get like a white before it kind of exposes back to the actual gameplay. Like you feel it's more impactful. You feel it. So I would say, unless you really care about esports, or you just don't want to have the budget for the 4K model with the extra price, then you'll be very, very, very happy with the QHD. And I did notice playing both of these competitively. I played some Halo on it, and I played some Overwatch on it. It's Halo Infinite multiplayer. I can imagine not a lot of people play Overwatch anymore, but it's a game that I'm familiar with, and I've played dozens of times. I have a lot of muscle memory with that game, and I'm developing that for Halo Infinite as well. And I'll tell you right off the bat, on on the 4K model, I was missing shots that I wouldn't miss on the QHD. The 240 hertz does make a difference, and I think because you're getting better frame times out of the QHD model compared to running at 4K, I definitely was a more confident FPS player or competitive player using the QHD model to by a good margin. So I have to just leave it at that. It's up to you. So for me, if I'm really playing seriously, I'm connecting to my monitor. And I'm getting. So I have a 200 hertz ultra wide monitor. If that's what I'm using when I want to play any type of competitive style video game. So for the most part, I'd rather have the 4K. But if this is your only device, if you're coming home from work and you're playing Call of Duty or Apex Legends or Fortnite or whatever the cool kids are playing these days, and you want an edge, then the QHD model is for you. And also on the panel side, I want to talk about the Advanced Optimus on the QHD and the regular traditional mux switch on the 4K device. I love Advanced Optimus. When I did my first look, I might have mentioned that I've been having some issues, and I still come across some situations where after switching from dedicated to Optimus, I would still have to restart just to get things working, but not all the time. And I do see that there's constant updates being pushed out that seem to be probably making things a little bit better. So that's good on that front. But overall, if they can nail Advanced Optimus, that's the only way I want to go. Especially if I'm doing some work or if I have a whole bunch of browser tabs open and I'm on battery and I decide, okay, now I want to play a game, so I plug in. Then I pretty much have to close everything out, make sure I save everything, and then restart into dedicated GPU mode. I love the idea of just on the fly being able to switch to Advanced Optimus. To me, that's a big deal, and that's something that would make me want to go more for the QHD model. But yeah. Oh, and also this has G-Sync while this does not, and especially at 144 hertz, you would much rather have G-Sync on this laptop than the QHD model. But unfortunately, G-Sync is only available on the QHD model, and I think that's why. I think that's another reason why my performance in fast-paced games was better on the QHD model because of G-Sync, and because of G-Sync, you can be running a game maxed out that can only give you like 30 to 40 frames a second, and it's a very smooth and playable experience. Because of how G-Sync operates that the 4K model doesn't have. But I didn't see any screen tearing on this. It still looked good. So I could go on and on about the difference between the displays. So it's up to you. It depends on availability, how much you want to spend, and what do you value more? Do you value resolution or do you value the free refresh rate? So I think I'm just going to leave the display section on that. If I'm not covering anything that you want me to, just leave me a comment, and just like the first time, I'll try to get to them as fast as I could, and I'm hoping that I'm able to help you make a better decision. That's my only intention for this channel. So software uses Razer Synapse. If you've used it before, then amazing. I tend to like Razer Synapse. I don't think it's the best software. I think the Armory Crate from ROG is the best software, and they constantly improve it. They're constantly coming out with good and meaningful updates. And in the software, this kind of goes back to performance a little bit. There's 3 different profiles. There's a silent, which is new, and I'm in silent right now, and on both of these, and it is dead silent. Granted, I'm not doing anything on them, but the most it would ramp up is to a very minimal hiss, which is great. If you've used any Razer in the past, 17 inches or 15, you know that you get no quiet time with it. The fans just randomly ramp up for no reason, and it's always loud, and it's always noticeable. This silent profile, I mean, even though I'm not doing anything on these laptops right now, any previous Razer device, there's no way I could have these on while recording this video and have something fairly quiet. So the silent profile is great. Then they have balance, which is essentially just balance. Balance is your only option when you're in battery mode, and it works well. It's balanced, but when you're gaming, only use custom and but put a boost on the CPU and put the GPU in high. If not, then you're not getting the full performance out of this laptop. And each profile is a noticeable bump in performance. On of that, battery I'm going to talk about quickly. I tested these both around the same brightness, which happened to be around 45% brightness on the 4K model and about 75% brightness on the QHD model. And just for a worst case scenario, I kept the full resolution and the full refresh rate for each of them. And I did just kind of had a YouTube video playing in the background, and then whenever I needed to do something on the laptop, I'll do it on the laptop. And nothing crazy, nothing more than just surfing the web or doing something with like a very light spreadsheet or Microsoft Word or something like that. So, and I've done this a few times, and I feel fairly comfortable with these numbers. On the 4K model, I got 3 hours, and then it went down to that ultra battery saver mode. So that's like there was like three and a half hours before it actually died. With the QHD model, I got 4 hours. Expect much better if you would change the refresh rate down to 60 hertz on both of those. So, I mean, you can determine if that's good or bad for you. For me, that's just enough for what I expect from a machine like this. But yeah, so that's just the battery. So now, last category, and before I give my conclusions, is performance. So yeah, let's just get right into it. On Halo Infinite, this is just a multiplayer test, and I tested everything on low with a 50% scaler just so I can maximize frames, because that's my intention for this particular test. I do have others when I'm focusing more on graphics, but something like Halo Infinite, I'm curious to see what's the max amount of frames I can get out of it. So on the i9 12900H, I got 214 frames per second, which is great. Last year, the best laptop, probably the Legion or the G. I didn't test Halo on the G76, but on the Legion, I don't think I got anywhere close to 200 frames per second. I think like maximum was like 180, and I think this is an attestation to Intel 12th Gen in general. So anyway, so on the 12900H, I got 214 frames per second, and on the i7 model, 12800H, I got 201 frames per second. Okay, so next on to Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I doubt this is a game that's typically being played anymore, but I like this particular benchmark, and you can see every reviewer still uses this benchmark tool. Even they even included in press materials. I remember when they announced the GE76 2022 model, which I have pre-ordered. Same thing, both the i7 version and the i9 version. So if you're interested in that, get subscribed. I think you're gonna get a much more meaningful comparison on the CPU side between those, because what I have noticed about the Razer is they cap the wattage on the CPU to 45 to 45 watts, while I'm expecting something thicker like the GE76 to maybe have more of an unlocked voltage when it comes to the CPU. So we'll wait and see. I have them both pre-ordered, and they're both coming in. So if you're interested in that kind of material, get liked and get subscribed. So with that being said, on the Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark, the 12800 version, which is the QHD model, I'm getting 116 frames at 1080p running low settings. No, wait, yeah, no, highest settings on the benchmark, but at a 1080p resolution, 116 frames per second versus 129 frames per second on the i9 12900H, which is the 4K model, and that's a 13% increase. So might not be amazing. It is in a way if you're playing competitive, if you're playing 1080p. So if you're hooking this guy up to a 1080p monitor, then you're going to get enough of a performance jump, 13% on the CPU, and that translates in some of that can translate to some of the more CPU intense games. Then you're going to probably want to consider this if the 4K i9 and an additional 13% uplift in FPS for competitive shooters for CPU bound titles is important to you, then I think the 4K might be better for you. And, if you're playing competitive, every little bit of edge counts. At 1440p, 85 frames per second on both of them, I didn't see much of a difference. And I even tested it at 4K, and the 12900 it was 59 for the 12800H and 61 for the 12900H, and I believe there were some variances there. I bet anything if I would run them again right now, they would be really close to identical. The only difference you're gonna see is when you're pushing the CPU. So next, let's look at Time Spy. On the GPU, I got 12,939 on the 12800 model, and I think the GPU just happens to be a little bit better on the QHD model, but that's really down to the silicon lottery. I don't think it has anything to do with the difference in these models. But anyway, with that being said, I got 12,714 on the 12900 model. That's a difference of 4%. That's negligible. On the CPU side, however, I got 13,378 on the i9 version and 12,736 on the i7 version. So a bit of a difference, and I kind of went through a whole spiel on how important that could be, depending on the type of game you play. On Cyberpunk, on 1080p, and this is running at ultra with DLSS quality mode. With the 12700, I'm getting 60 FPS at 1080p, 61 on the 12900H, 48 FPS on both of them at 1440p, and at 4K, 24 to 25. If you do plan on playing this game in 4K, definitely just use the DLSS Ultra Performance. It still looks better than QHD native, and especially if you're looking at it on a TV like the LG OLED. DLSS does a really good job at higher resolution, so I'd really recommend that. Okay, so moving on to the next title. Let's look at Red Dead Redemption 2 on the 12700H at the 12800H, I should say, at 1080p. I got 93 frames per second. And on the 12900H, I got 96 frames per second. No, not the end of the world. 1440p on both of them. The best benchmark I was able to get was 79 FPS, and in 4K, it was 60. Another time I ran it was 60.6. So let's just say 60. Dying Light, Ultra with DLSS quality, I was getting like around 48 FPS per second, and I also did test Borderlands 3, and that's mainly because for the same reason as Shadow of the Tomb Raider. It's a good benchmark for both CPU and GPU driven titles. So On badass mode, which is that just their ultra settings, I was getting 81 FPS on the 12700 and 82 on the 12900. That's I'm not even gonna talk about that. Let's just say that's pretty identical. But on very low, and this comes back to the differences between the GPUs. On the 12700H, I got 139.54 FPS, but 150 with the 12900H. So again, coming back, if you plan on connecting the 12900H to a 1080p monitor, so at any point, then there is some reason to go with the i9. But if you're using either of these at their dedicated resolutions, QHD and 4K, there's not going to be any difference. So if for gaming specifically, it's almost not worth it to consider the i9 version just for the i9 processor. The only reason you should consider this, the 4K model, is for 4K. That's the only big appreciable difference. Again, unless you're a very serious competitive gamer who wants a lighter package. If you care more about frames, I would still recommend the GE76 or the Scar 15 or Scar 17, which is coming out. My Scar 15 3080 Ti shipped, and my Scar 17 3080 Ti should be arriving in early to mid March. So I have a lot of laptops coming in. So again, if you're interested in this type of content, get liked and get subscribed. I would really, really appreciate it. So that kind of that concludes the performance section. So overall thoughts, they've made so many improvements in terms of performance to this compared to last year. Last year, the TGP maxed out at 130 watts, and with the Intel processor and the way dynamic boost works, I barely saw it in any title. It was still pushing like 115 watts, and it was just embarrassing that something like the Scar 15 without a mux switch, and the 3080 also goes to 130 watts, was destroying this. I think now they're finally competitive. One thing I am interested to see is how a non-Max Q variant of the 3080 Ti does compared to a Max P, So again, I'm waiting to see that. But regardless, in terms of the overall package, it's the thin laptop, and you feel it when you pick it up and you're walking around with it, and the fact that you're able to get such great performance with not outrageous fan noise. The thermals are for the most part in check, except for the CPU, but you're only going to see it throttle if you're maxing out the CPU. And no game maxes out the CPU. So in games, the max temperature of the CPU, like I might have mentioned, was like 90, 95. Not in throttle territory, still considered safe according to Intel's standards. But yeah, I think these are just outstanding laptops. The pricing is a bit ludicrous this year, but it looks like everything's up. I think the pricing is very competitive to something like the GE76. This is more expensive, and why are they charging more? I think we can. What Razer is offering in the GE76, I am expecting better performance from the GE76, and if that's all you care about, then yeah, go for the GE76. But my needs have changed throughout the years. I need a combination of both a laptop to use and to have good performance. Not to say that the G76 is a gigantic machine. It's not like the Area 51M that I had years ago, or some of the other gigantic laptops that seem to have kind of been a bit extinct, is what it seems like. But I think this manages both performance and portability really, really well, just because it's such a thin package. But I think in terms of pricing, Razer is able to charge more than what the GE76 is because of these displays. There's no other way to get a 4K 144 hertz panel. Like that in itself is a groundbreaking. I didn't even think that was possible. If you would have told me this 2 years, even last year, I would have said no. That's not possible. How is a laptop able to do that? And with the Intel chip in here, even though it's running at 4K, it's still manageable. Like even last year when I was using the 4K 120 hertz, you felt like an additional sense of input lag and a bit of weightiness when scrolling through web pages. Like it had to think a little bit more. Not so with this. It's just as fluid and fast as a QHD model. You do notice a little bit of the frame time delay when playing competitive shooters, and that's why I did mention that I was able to hit shots better with the QHD model. But there's no laptop with a 4K 144 hertz, and there's no QHD 17-inch panel that also has advanced Optimus. And if I'm wrong, then maybe I'll leave a comment or something, but and I'll pin it. But I think that's the case here. Advanced Optimus QHD 240 hertz with advanced Optimus and 4K 144 hertz. I think the displays is why Razer could get away charging more than the competition because of that exclusive feature. I know the Duo when it comes out, it has some interesting display options. It has a QHD 165 hertz mini LED panel, which I'm excited to see, and it sounds like they're doing a lot of work to make it useful on all fronts, from both creators and to gamers. And their second option is a 4K 120 hertz panel, but with a button you press and then a restart, it's able to go down to a 1080p 240 hertz panel. So I'm interested to see those. But I mean, if you're a Razer fan, this is the best time to buy. The best time to buy a Razer Blade 17-inch. I still don't recommend the 15-inch because you're just not getting enough power for the price they're charging. And I think even this year, I think it maxes out the 95 watts. Let me know if I'm right or wrong in the comments. I think at 15 inches, you'd want to go with either the Scar 15, the new X15, or maybe even like an Aorus, because that might still perform better than the Razer Blade 15. But at the 17-inch level, if you have the budget for it, I could easily recommend picking this up. I think you will love it. I mean, if you're okay with the weight, which is like 6 point something pounds, and 3 hours to 4 hours of battery, other than that, you're getting the best Windows experience you can get on a laptop today, and I say that with a lot of confidence.